I hope you don't have very high expectations for this first talk. I actually welcome this opportunity because I'm currently in my professional transition, again, even if I'm getting old. And so this, for me, was an opportunity to look back what I've been doing in the last 5 years. And in a sort of way, looking back for me is always looking forward. So let's go straight to what I'm going to talk with you. So this is not a lecture. This is really sharing my experience. I hope it will be meaningful for you. And what I've been doing so far is managing communication for EU-funded projects on sustainable tourism, biodiversity protection, urban transport, and all these subjects. And so I've been asked quite often to communicate for promoting engagement, and of course for promoting engagement of youth as well. By working, what I realized is that I was in an environment that is highly digitalized, as you can imagine. And so I took my tools that I developed during my master here in France, where I learned how to map the field where we operate. And so I will try to go through this map that is really my own map, so it can be sometimes illogical, of the communication environment in which I was operating. So to map something, we need to have poles. And in between the different poles, we try to put our position. So the position is always relative to the different poles. The first axe is from targeted communication to general public. That means we are sometimes aware of the audience, so we have quite precise information about who we want to talk with. So it's targeted communication, or sometimes they simply ask us, talk to the general public. That most of the time means I don't know who, so go there. The other axe that I think is quite relevant is from fragmented discourse to a big narrative. A big narrative is a storytelling that normally takes quite a long time, is embracing a lot of subjects, while fragmented discourse is really pieces that can put together, they can have an overall meaning, but also not. We will see afterward with some examples. The other axe is the duration of the message. So to make this more clear, we go into the different quadrant, and I will present you some examples. So big narrative, general public, duration. The first example is universities. When we start the university, we are clearly in a big narrative because it takes years. It's not for the general public because normally there is a selection. So it's long, takes long time. Quite a lot of people are going, so it's mass instruction. But it's not for everybody. What is for everybody is Fidel Castro. You are pretty young, so you don't remember probably his speeches. I don't too, just to comfort you. But he has the world record of the longest speech ever at the UN Assembly. He was able to speak for hours. And he was speaking for hours because he wanted to reach as much public as possible. So the more you target, the less you shorten your message. If we move to another quadrant, between general public and fragmented discourse, we have this first example. I cannot really pronounce this game because I discovered last week, is when you are trying to face somebody, but you are blind. So you are producing short messages, and you are trying to fetch a general public. So you are moving blindly, and you don't know where you are going. The other example is scattered communication. I think most of you have been in this situation of have your bag full of tools, full of stuff, and you know that you have something useful for somebody else, and you have two alternatives. One is to open it, to fetch for the useful tool and to hand it over, or simply to throw everything on a table and ask the people, okay, look and help yourself. Of course, these two ways of communicating are completely ineffective. And sometimes when you feel that this is ineffective, the trap that you can end is the Veni Vidi Vici model. Julius Caesar used to say this sentence when he was, for example, conquering France. So he said, I came, I saw, I conquered, and is the modern version of the selfie. So you are going to the COP27, and the most important thing that you have to say about the COP27, I was there. So that's the big news. Because you are producing fragmented discourse, you don't know what to say, you don't know who you're talking to, so you end up with a selfish exercise. The other quadrant is between targeted communication and fragmented discourse, but here we are going toward a more awareness of your audience. And the first example that I want to share is marketing and remarketing. So in this quadrant, you know which behavior you want to change, and you know who you are targeting. So marketing and remarketing is a modern technique when you put cookies in a different website or in the smartphone, and you follow your user throughout the different devices until you convince the user to do what you want him to do. And normally it's buying something. The other example is nudging. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this. An example that is understandable for the men, mainly, if you go in a toilet, in the modern toilet where men are doing the things standing, you have a small fly. And this is a very nice example of nudging. So you are, you tend to kill the fly somehow. Yeah, this is nudging. So it's a series of small pushes to change the behavior of somebody. Of course, also this one is for convincing somebody to buy. The trap, because quite often there is a trap, is that you end up in a cognitive bubble. You are so focused on the technique of following somebody that you miss the bigger picture, and you end up talking only to people that looks like you. So you are trapped in this bubble, and you can wave your audience because you are completely isolated, and you are convincing people that are already on your side. Of course, you can imagine that there is a happy ending, so the last quadrant is the most interesting one. So I think we need both. We need targeted communication, where we produce short messages, but we need a big narrative that is providing meaning. Because we are not selling anything. We are communicating for engagement. That is something completely different. So we need to change a behavior, not just to click there and to buy something, but to change the behavior for quite a long time. So we need a big narrative that stays into what we can call an overarching story that is made of episodes. So really the model that I think is most effective is the Netflix model, the series model. So you have a series with an overarching story that is made of self-standing episodes, somehow one linking to the other, but they are producing a meaning. So I think we arrive to the keywords in communicating for engagement, that is meaning. I think what we are missing most urgently is to produce a new meaning that is giving sense to everything that we say, everything that we are communicating. So this is the whole field. To produce meaning, to engage everybody, because we need everybody on board. What I propose as an interesting tool to develop a new meaning is Bruno Latour down to earth. Why down to earth? He's using this metaphor. With the Industrial Revolution, we took off. It means that we were convinced that nature, our environment, was something to exploit. was a place where we can extract what we need, and a place that we can shape according to our needs. So we took off, believing that we were landing in a place that we were building. What has changed now is that we don't know where to land anymore, because the place that we imagined, the airport that we imagined, the airport that we thought and we believed we were building, we understood it doesn't exist. So we don't know where to land, and we need to change our approach to the nature, to the environment, and to think again collectively, so to co-design a big narrative and to co-produce a new meaning. Okay, I see that I'm getting boring. But this is to produce the meaning, but I want to conclude with some advice on how to produce the messages. In my job, that is mainly writing, even if I'm not a writer, and I don't pretend to be a writer, but I normally write a lot. I have 3 masters that I would like to share with you. The first one is Ernest Hemingway. I quite relate to him because he was a journalist, a novelist, and I used to be a journalist. And the model that he proposed is what we call the iceberg theory, of the theory of omission. That means basically that the author, so before producing a message, you need to know everything about what you are talking about. But you don't have to say everything to the reader. On the contrary, you have to tell only what is needed to the reader to get the feeling that there is an iceberg underneath. So you have to play with what you say and what you don't say. Because language is not simply words, language is also silence, and it's also mission. So from this theory, I make the link with this poet. As you understood, I'm Italian, and I'm not simply Italian. I'm from the same region of Giacomo Leopardi, who was, I think, the greatest poet in the 19th century, who made this poem about infinito, that is infinity, but understood, infinity is between endless, undefined, and impossible. The meaning of infinito of Leopardi is somewhere there. And what he's saying is that basically he's sitting, looking at the landscape, and there is an edge hiding half of the landscape. So there is an obstacle that is formally forbidding us the view of the full landscape. And he's inviting us not to think of the obstacle as such, but to think of the obstacle as a trigger, as a leverage. Because thanks to the edge, we can imagine something. We can imagine the infinito. We can go beyond. So with the edge, we can play on triggering imagination and triggering engagement. The last author, so 2 out of 3 are Italians, nevertheless, is Italo Calvino, is The Castle of Cross Destiny. And the novel is quite interesting. So basically, he's talking of travelers and knights in an hypothetical Middle Age, crossing a forest. And when they come out of the forest, they end up in a tavern. And when they enter the tavern, they realize that nobody speaks. It's impossible to speak. And they try to tell their stories because they had experiences in the forest, and they realize they cannot speak. So what they are doing is to tell the story by putting cards on the table. So somebody is starting to tell the story by putting his own cards on the table, and when he has finished, there is somebody else hooking up to that story and telling another story, and so on and so on. So basically, what we see is that storytelling is just a combination and recombination of the same symbols. And we have to be aware, so going back to the iceberg and the hedge, that when we communicate, we just do half of the job. Because after, when we produce something, it is on the wide, is on the public. So the readers, the audience, will take what we say and will build his own interpretation of it. So be aware of that and play with that potential of combination. So I'm already way too long. I would like to conclude with one advice. So what is communication, what is language, is a question that we've been searching for centuries. And we have finally discovered that every living being is communicating. Vegetables, animals, human beings, everybody. Every living is communicating, but just humans talk. So just humans are able to recombine meanings, to listen, to re-elaborate, and etc. So my advice, and what I think I honestly believe you should do, is when you communicate, don't behave like animals, behave like humans. So talk and listen. And mainly do listen and after talk. So thank you very much.